Okay, I wanted to give a pretty thorough review and update of my injuries and a preliminary round of advice for what to do. So, it's easiest if I talk about them linearly than to try to do them tandem. So, I'll start 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. I was 30 and in probably the best shape of my life. I just finished a triathlon and was enjoying the last little bits of summer. I was mountain biking and going on a pretty flat section, but relatively fast, maybe 20 miles an hour. And a rock had found its way into my fork, and it basically acted as a quick stop brake for my bike, and I flipped over and I hit the ground and I slid on this shoulder. This is my left shoulder, and I was in quite a bit of pain. I mean, it's very visceral. I can remember it pretty well, and my arm was scraped up. I had a big gash on my knee. I didn't know what I had done, but I knew I had messed up my shoulder. I thought I had dislocated it. So, because of the movies and other videos I've seen, I thought I could pop it back into place. So I yanked on it a little bit, and that didn't work. So, my brother came up behind me and he said, "Oh, don't do that. You've probably separated your AC joint." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? What is that?" Um, anyway, so we had to walk the rest of the way down, and that was a long journey. It probably was a 1 mile downhill, and it's really painful having to take every step. So, um, before I forget, I recommend bringing a fanny pack with you when you go mountain biking. I know it sounds silly, but I actually used it the second time I separated my shoulder as a sling, and it was much better. I actually got down the mountain by myself. Okay, so back to the story. So we get down, I go to Instacare, and they diagnosed me with an AC joint separation. They tell me to go see a specialist. I was able to get into a specialist pretty quickly. I think I got in there 2 days after, and he said it's definitely a grade 3, if not higher. And based on what I'm seeing, I recommend surgery. He also said because of your age, you have a better chance of a full recovery, getting all of your function back. I recommend surgery. And I had done my own research up to that point, and I felt like surgery was the right choice. There were a few others who kind of said to wait, but no. What they said was, of course, the surgeon is going to recommend surgery. And I understand the sentiment, but that doesn't mean that the surgeons are, uh, you know, all about the money. I think they do genuinely care about your health and well-being, and their reputation. So I decided to go through with it. He was able to get me in 3 days later. The night before, a relative of mine had told me that they did not like the surgeon, and I'm telling you, whatever choice you make, you're gonna have people from both sides, or you're gonna feel unsupported from at least a few people, and you'll second guess yourself. So uh, don't worry about what other people say. Do your own research online, and just think about your own gut. What is your gut telling you, and go with that, and go with the doctor. I think you can't go wrong there. Um, so I got in that's like 5 days post injury. I was still in pretty bad shape. I was still in a lot of pain. I slept in a recliner at my in-laws' house, and I stayed in a sling the whole time. I had no idea what the recovery process was like, so I assumed that was the best case scenario. Um, and yeah, so I slept in a recliner, took Advil, was miserable for 5 days. I didn't really get better as far as I could tell. Um, I got really dirty when I crashed my bike. It's really dusty trail, and I got a shower in, and that's a really difficult procedure to do alone. I really hope that if you have this injury, that you have somebody that you can take a shower in front of. If not, put on some swim trunks and have them help you. So the day of, I was fasting, didn't get into surgery until about 4 o'clock, and had my surgery. Um, Woke up feeling pretty nauseous. Drive home. Had brain fog for a few days. I had actually, sorry, let me back up. Had requested a nerve block on my arm, so my entire left arm is numb. Like my hand, couldn't feel anything. It was a really odd sensation, um, but it helped. It helped with the pain the first 24 hours, but it was really really weird. Um, about 2 to 3 days after the surgery, I had a really hard time coming to from the amnesia, not the amnesia, sorry, the anesthesia, and the brain fog was real. I was looking forward to some couch potato time and watching movies and marathoning TV shows and things, and I couldn't. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do any of that. I had to stare at a fixed point on the wall and not move my eyes. Otherwise, I'd get dizzy, I'd get nauseous, I would get headaches, and it was awful. Awful, awful, awful. Um, so that's one major problem I have with surgery is you may feel like you have that lingering for several months after. Um, the other thing is the procedure is after you get your surgery, and by the way, the type of surgery I had was the lockdown surgery. Basically, a surgical ligament that they put in my shoulder. It has a single screw and then has like a really strong tether that secures the two bones together. Um, from what I've read, that was one of the better procedures. The Weaver Dunn's kind of outdated. Well, it's not that it's outdated, it's just that it's not as successful as the lockdown surgery. The button hook one, the one where it's like the butterfly button, whatever, I don't remember what that's called, but that's also a good one from what I've read. The one where they just stick a giant screw down, don't do that. I wouldn't do that. It's not, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. The thing about ligaments is when you separate them, they don't really go back the same way. So your best case scenario is you have kind of like a very, mixed up, mangled scar tissue version of your ligament. I don't think it's stronger after that. I think it's still pretty weak and very flexible. So even if you don't fully separate your shoulder, you have to deal with that. So with surgery, what are you trying to do? Well, can you get a better result than that? The Weaver Dunn tries to sew it back together, from what I understand. With the lockdown, they're kind of relying on this surgical ligament to take care of things. There may be some laddering effect that happens with the ligaments, but I only read like 1 or 2 papers that mentioned that, so I wouldn't count on it. It requires people to die and to open up their cadavers, I think, for the most part. So, yeah. Okay, so that's the surgery I got. The protocol is to not get the stitches wet for a week after. So, got to be careful about showering or just don't shower at all. And then the bandages come off. You can get it wet. My stitches were internal, so it looked great and didn't have to do any stitch removal, which is a blessing because I wanted to pass out when I went to get the bandages off. It was crazy. I was flesh white. I don't know. I can handle a lot of things. I really can. But that I couldn't. I almost passed out. For a month after the surgery, you are in a sling 24/7. No weight bearing and not even like your own body weight, right? So you're in a sling 24/7. And it's pretty uncomfortable. I mean, you're uncomfortable for that entire month for the most part. It gets better week after week, but at least for the first couple of weeks, I was pretty uncomfortable. I had also so here's some complicating factors. We were expecting a child in October, so I had separated my shoulder end of July, a child in October. So a lot of our decisions were based on timing. If we were going to get it done, we wanted to do it now, ASAP. Otherwise, my recovery would bleed into our new baby, and I wouldn't be as much help in the labor and delivery. So that's one of the reasons why we decided to go with the surgery with such haste. So to complicate other things, is we were going to Hawaii in a few weeks. So I was in Hawaii with a sling. I wasn't able to do any of the surfing or any of the fun stuff, unfortunately. But that was also something I had to consider, is I had to spend some of my recovery time in Hawaii. Okay, so I get back from Hawaii, sling comes off, and I can now dangle my arm. That's about it. You can see from my other videos that I can barely lift it. It's pretty trippy to not be able to move your arm, because you don't. I mean, like you're technically you're kind of healed-ish, right? But you have to. It's a process, and the surgeon did not recommend. Not that he didn't recommend it, but he didn't say like you must go do this. He didn't recommend physical therapy. So I thought that was a little bit weird, but I think because of my age, he wasn't worried about me getting back to normal. But I happen to have a cousin who is in physical therapy, and she gave me a bunch of material to do, and I go over those in other videos. They're all over the internet. So I do them, and it takes about 2 to 4 weeks to get my full range of motion back. I can't bear weight, mind you, but I can do these rehab exercises. I eventually get my full range of motion back, but I have a weight restriction, and our baby is born. So my weight restriction is now 5 pounds. So we're 2 months post-surgery, 5-pound weight limit. And, I'm semi-useful. Our baby was like 7 or 6 pounds. So I was just thinking, oh, what's 1 pound? So I did break the rules a little bit, but other than that, I was pretty true to the recovery process. After 3 months, there's no restrictions at all. You can do whatever you want. But I did not want to do whatever I wanted. It still hurt. It was still difficult I didn't have my strength back. And my workout routine before this was swimming, road biking, mountain biking, skiing, and the 5 main lifts. Let's see if I can remember them: deadlifts, squats, overhead press, bench press, and upright rows. So very difficult to do the bench press. The bench press and the squats with this kind of injury. I mean, it's your shoulders, and that's where the bar goes. So it was really difficult to give that up and try some other intermediate routine. But I was a little worried that I wouldn't be able to do those things. And then the pandemic hits, so going to the gym was difficult or impossible. So it wasn't until about a year later that I started putting a barbell on my back and doing squats. And it was a little uncomfortable at first. My grip had to change. I used to have my grip really close, but after both injuries now, my grip is a lot wider, because I need it to be lower on my back and less on my clavicle and upper shoulder girdle area. So having a wider grip helps distribute that weight a little better. But I would say at about a year, I felt like I was back to normal. I was swimming, I was doing everything that I wanted to. The only lingering issues is that there's a scar at the surgery site. And that's one thing I find interesting, is the people who say one reason to do surgery is to help with the look of the bump. But then I'm like, well, then you have this scar. And, pick your poison. Do you want a bump, or do you want a scar? The other thing is so I lost feeling around the scar, and I can feel the screw. I can feel it through my skin, and if I have a backpack strap on it, just don't love it. Even now, 3 years later, don't love it. Having things on my shoulders, not a problem, but just right there, very locally, an issue. The only other issue I find is, or I realized or noticed, is when I picked up rock climbing just a few months ago, and certain pulls after I finished using this arm were just shooting pain, but then it would go away. It wasn't like a ongoing thing. So for the most part, I'm happy with how this turned out. The one thing that I'm worried about going forward is what happens if the hardware fails. What happens if I land on this shoulder again? And will the screw compromise the integrity of the bone? Will that be a weak point that'll cause the clavicle to snap? What do I do? Can I have a screw just floating around in there? So I'm a little worried about that. I probably should have figured that out. So if you want to ask an orthopedic surgeon, figure out what they have to say about it, let me know. But I hopefully don't find out the answer to that. So that's one thing that sticks out to me as a worry and a problem. It's also expensive. I mean, if you don't have healthcare, it's really expensive. And even if you do have healthcare, it's expensive. So that's a problem as well. Other than that, I don't think that not having surgery is better than having surgery. I don't think that, at least yet. I do think that if you can handle being useless for a few months, if that doesn't make you ultra depressed, if you can handle potentially losing your mind a little bit after surgery, if you can afford it, if you have the luxury of time, if you have somebody that can help you recover, I think that's important. Yeah, I think surgery is a pretty good option. If you're under the age of 45, 50, I think based on what I've read a lot of papers, extensively. What else are you going to do as you're just sitting there? And I needed to know what the right choice was. So I've read dozens of research papers, surveys sent out to orthopedic surgeons about the procedures that they prefer. You name it, I've read it. And the surgery route isn't bad, especially if you use one of the more updated surgeries. You have to be careful when you look at research because you have to parse, was this a Weaver Dunn procedure? Was this one of the older procedures done before the 90s? You know, like which one what are we comparing against? And I think the results are pretty clear, pretty decent for surgery. Okay, now, having said that, 6 months ago, guess what I did? I separated this shoulder, my right shoulder. Oh, by the way, this is my non-dominant arm, but it is the arm that I wipe with. Sorry if that's too much information, but it is super frustrating to have to figure out how to use your right hand if that's not the one you're used to using. But anyway, this is not my dominant arm. So it is kind of interesting that you would hear me do surgery on the arm that is not dominant versus the one that is. So about almost 6 months ago, I do it again. The template is there. Late July, I'm going to Hawaii. My wife is pregnant. We're due in October. The situation is almost identical. The main difference is when I separated this shoulder, I was a much more timid rider, and I was just going around a berm, and I hit a pothole basically, and it just turned my wheel 90 degrees, sent me into the inside of the berm, and I just landed directly on it. But this time, way less trauma, like not even scrapes or scratches. It was just like, it's almost as if like somebody specifically picked my AC joint and just whacked it with a hammer. It took me a couple of days to get to the doctor, and even in that time frame, it was already feeling better, unlike this one. Oh, by the way, when he opened this one up, and it's really hard to tell which grade you have until they open you up. When he opened this one up, it was a grade 5. So the distance was more than double, I think, between where it used to be and where it was. Also with the surgery, they cut off the end of the clavicle. They cut off the end of the clavicle. They say it's because it should help with arthritis, because if you have a loose bone kind of rubbing up against, like the distance between the bones is so dialed in that, like, if you lose your ligament, I think there's a greater chance of arthritis developing in the future. So they say, like, while we're in there, we might as well cut that off at the end. I also think it helps them get the bone really close at first so that later it'll stretch. And I listened to my doctor, and he denies saying this, but he told me, I remember that there was a little bit of lift after the surgery, like a few months later, which is fine with me. Like, I'm fine with it. But I think because of that, they cut off the end. Okay. Back to this most recent injury. So I land on my shoulder, and it's just right. I go to the doctor, and this time he says, you can wait and see. And he says, see how that option goes this time, which is different. Last time he was very, like, you probably want to fix this. Now, going back to the conspiracy theory or the conflict of interest, I asked him when his next surgery was, and it wasn't for another 3 weeks, whereas last time it was within 2 days. So is it that he wanted to fill his schedule? No, I still don't think so. Look, he's rich. He's an orthopedic surgeon. He's made a lot of money. I don't think he needs to con me into getting surgery. So with that said, I thought, you know what? I think I will wait because I hate the surgery. I hated the surgery process. I have a very fragile mind. In my family, we have some mental illness, and anxiety runs deep, and I just couldn't see myself going through the surgery again. Here's a moment of truth. All right, let's be honest. We're going to be honest with each other. I told my wife to hide my gun. I couldn't believe I had separated my shoulder again. And it's a miserable process. And I had done a lot of research. And because of grade 3 is that perfect middle ground. It's the place where you think, okay, you can either decide to do surgery or not do surgery. And you might end up with pretty decent results either way. Grades 4, 5, and 6, it's pretty. You're pretty much guaranteed. So after the doctor's appointment, I went to the physical therapist who is right next door, and I just asked him straight up. I said, "Am I going to regret this based on your experience?" Because the orthopedic surgeon, I mean, they do follow up, but like not nearly as much as a physical therapist. I think a physical therapist spends an hour directly working with them on various movements, several months, years even after an injury, and I think that they have a pretty decent opinion. So I asked him, I said, do you think I'm going to regret this? And he said, if it's a 5, because it's basically 3 and a 5 are just the distance, that's the main difference. A 4 and a 6 is the placement laterally of the bone. So it's weird that it's not sequential, but anyway. So he said if it's a 5, almost everybody gets the surgery eventually. They'll try to rehab it, but then they'll get the surgery because a 5 sucks. It's really far apart. If it's a 3, he said he sees mixed results. So I'm like, well, crap, what do I have? Because nobody can really tell you for certain. The way you know what you have is either, like I said, surgery, opening up the skin, seeing and measuring it. The other is what type of movement and range of motion do you get several months down the road? Like, kind of a weird thing, but that's based on their responses, based on what I've read online. That's how you can tell. That's the best ways you can tell. Sure, you can get an x-ray and measure it, but because of angles and things, it can be difficult to know for sure. So I thought, what the heck? Let's try it. Because if you can't see me in 3 weeks, until 3 weeks, and I'm back to where I started last time, might as well just wait and see. And after a couple of weeks, I was already feeling better. Now, what I found online, initially, the 2 schools of thought. One of them was basically, it's all about your comfort level. So if you can go without a sling, don't wear a sling. And wearing a sling sucks so bad that after about 4 days, I stopped wearing a sling. And I used KT tape to tape my shoulder. And it was mildly uncomfortable. I had to take rests, but it beat the pants off of wearing a sling. So I didn't. I don't think that that's necessarily wrong, but I do wonder if I shouldn't have a month later, like I was pretty comfortable carrying certain weights, but I didn't pay any attention to how heavy something was. I just felt like if I could pick it up, then I was allowed to pick it up. There's nobody giving you weight restrictions like with the surgery. So I wonder if taking it slower would have been a better choice for me. Regardless, I did the KT tape, and I waited about 2 weeks, and this is at the recommendation of the physical therapist. I asked him, when should I come in for physical therapy? And he said, wait 2 weeks. So I waited 2 weeks and I went in and I started physical therapy. Mostly range of motion and mild elastic bands. We stayed away from overhead motions for the first little while because he knew it would be too uncomfortable. And the prevailing recommendation is let pain be your guide. So if it was too painful, I didn't do it, and or I reduced the weight. So for the first 2 months, I did that. I did the elastic bands. I had the ones that close into the door, so you have like an anchor point, and I had pretty good results. But I did it every day, sometimes twice a day, and I was religious about it, and so I recovered pretty quickly. So I'll spoil it for you. So here's both shoulders. I bet you can't tell which one's the rehab, which one's not. Which one's the surgery, which one's not. I have full range of motion behind the back. It's all the same. That's not any different. There were a lot of sensations that I was like, oh, okay, I remember this. And there were things that I was like, oh, I thought this was because of surgery, but it's because of the injury. So you're going to feel pain both ways you go. With a surgery, I feel like your time starts once the surgery happens. So like if you start making a recovery but you've scheduled a surgery a month later, you're going to reset your clock. So if I decide to do surgery on the shoulder, I'm starting over from scratch. All of that healing that I've done, gone out the window. They cut through your muscle, they cut through the fascia, they cut through everything. So that's important to think about as you're making a decision. When you don't do surgery, your recovery starts right away. Like it starts as soon as you crash, basically. And I was much more useful more quickly. Having said that, my memory's a little foggy on the timeline. So remember, this one had a full year before I was really squatting. And this one, I started squatting yesterday and putting weight on my back. And it felt okay. Some days it doesn't feel okay. Some days it sucks. I was shoveling snow and making an igloo for my daughter, and it was really painful that day. I don't know why. It might have to do with the weather. It could be one of those things where if the weather's just right, it aches that day. Otherwise, it's fine. It's not a problem. I don't really think about it all that much. Now, I admit that there are things that I do once in a while that I'm thinking this will be a true test. So this summer I redid my shed, and one of the steps was to remove the roof, and I put a lot into it, and that probably would have really hurt my other shoulder. So I don't know how that's going to pan out in the future. Will I be able to do that? I don't know. Probably not. Will I be able to lift a 50-pound bag of rock salt from my soft water? Sure, most likely. So it's just, there's a lot up in the air, but based on what I can already do, I'm pretty happy with not doing surgery. Having said that, I had some pressures that were there last time. I had another baby due, and this time I had a toddler to take care of. So I was required, I was needed more than I was last time. And she can't wipe her own butt. So to have my pregnant wife have to take care of my toddler, carry her everywhere, just doesn't sound fair. And we're on a time crunch. I had talked to several doctors this time and sent over my x-rays. One I happen to know growing up, and he does a lot of athletes, a ton of athletes. And I asked his opinion, especially about the timing. So I said, if I can't do it in 3 months, can I do it in 6 months? And he said, you can do it whenever. You can do it in a year. You can do it in 2 years, 3 years. Because there's nothing about this surgery that requires... So I have read this. I've read this on a few papers. If you can do the surgery within 3 weeks while the wound is still fresh, the healing might be quicker because there's blood in the area. The body is receiving all the signals it needs to the spot. So I think that there is a benefit to doing it sooner. My result for this shoulder may not have been as good if I wasn't in there as quickly as I was. And again, it's 3 weeks that I read. I think there's a big benefit to doing it quickly. But if that's not an option, then, or if you want to wait and see, that's okay. I think you'll still have good results if in the end you ultimately decide to do it, because they cut off the end of the clavicle. And so I asked him, I said, can I wait? And he said, well, is this where they cut off the end of the clavicle? Like, is that what they did with your last one? And I said, yes. And he said, you can do it whenever. So I think his reasoning is if there's any healing of the that ligament at the end of the clavicle, it would have happened within the first 3 weeks. Otherwise, it doesn't matter because they're cutting it off anyway. It's not going to regrow to anything there. So I'm a big fan of the wait and see option, especially if it's a grade 3. If it's a grade 5, I mean, honestly, unless it's a timing issue, just get it done. I would just get it done. Or if you're if you're younger, just get it done. Just get it done. I know there's always complications with surgery, but I wouldn't worry about them. I'm not personally worried about them. Having said that, if you're like anti-surgery or if you're strapped for money or whatever it is, if there's any reason at all, you have my full support to not do surgery, because I'm going to live a full life. There's not really much I can't do right now. And again, I'm only 5.5 months into my recovery. So, and by the way, this does come with a catch. You have to be really, really good at physical therapy. You have to stick with it. I've been doing it every day. I can tell when I haven't been doing it. In fact, when I was doing the igloo, it had been a week because of illness and the holidays and a lot of other factors. I hadn't been doing my rehab. So stick to your rehab, at least for 6 months, every day. Try to do it every day, if not every other day. And then at least once a week after that is probably my plan. And I think there's a lifelong commitment to good posture. So if you've enjoyed hunched shoulders and slouching, say goodbye. Okay, that was the old you. The new you has good posture. Their shoulders are pinned back, right? They have good posture, seating posture. So do that, all right? Just, that's the price you pay to not do surgery. Now, if you don't do rehab, you'll probably still have okay results too, but you want to have the best shot at getting better. As far as aesthetics go, I don't know if I'll be able to really... It's going to be different. Everybody's bones look different from what I found. And like I don't even know if you can tell. I think the biggest time you can tell is in the mirror when your shirt's off and you got two shoulders side by side. But if you have your shoulders pinned back, if you have good posture, you can't tell. I can't tell with mine. But my bone structure is different than yours. And the way my fat and muscle and all that lays on my skin, on my bones, it's going to look different. So that's hard to say. Okay, so a few things regardless of what you do. Have a good set of slings. I like the one that has a buckle in the front. Got it off of Amazon. I want to be able to put my sling on myself. And I hate having to ask for other people to do it. So do that. Get a couple of slings and at least one that has a clip in the front. I don't like the one that has your arm seated out. I don't know if you can tell, but like out here. Don't like it. It wasn't comfortable for me. Get a sling that you can shower in. So I have a mesh sling. If you live in a humid climate, there's also slings that are breathable. All right, so that's my recommendation there. If you can, get a pulley. There's a pulley that you can put in your door, and it helps you lift this arm using this hand. You just kind of do this action. Helps you do certain stretches. It's especially useful at the beginning. Get yourself elastic bands and a gym membership. I've been using the cable machine, which is a hot item. I had no idea, but we have 6 of those machines, and they are always taken. So I have to watch it like a hawk, wait for it to open, and I soar in and swoop and take it. It's a great machine, though. Trying to think what else. Get a lot of shirts that button and button in the front so that you can put them on. Over the head, really hard to do at the beginning. Like really hard to do those movements. Really uncomfortable. Get button-up shirts. You'll thank me later. Like the first week, don't even plan on wearing a shirt. Just get a hoodie. Get something that's oversized. Keep your arm in a sling. I mean, just don't worry about getting clothed. If you have a bidet might help the whole wiping process. I think those are the major learnings. It'll always be difficult. You'll always be second guessing yourself. There'll be a mental journey as well as a physical journey, and just be prepared for it. Doubt is going to creep in, no matter which option you choose, surgery or no surgery. You're going to get people who tell you did the wrong thing. It's funny because I experienced both when I did the surgery and when I chose not to. I heard both sides, and I was like, okay, first of all, where were you when I did the opposite of what you're telling me? And it's funny. I don't know why they feel like they have to weigh in and make you second guess yourself. But a few other things to consider is, of course, if you're an athlete and overhead motions are important to you, get it. You're going to, even if you don't get it, if you get it, regardless, you're going to feel different. It's never going to be the same. Just dismiss that completely. But that's okay because you'll get used to it. You'll be fine with it. But having said that, I think repetitive motion, if you're a basketball player, if you swim, that's probably a good reason to get surgery. Again, if you're younger, get surgery. If you're older, maybe not. I don't know. Depends on the phase of life you're in. I'm trying to remember all the questions people have asked me. I can't tell you how much paranoia slips in, and you're questioning even the most minute things about what you should do with your body and your time and how you should feel and what's normal and what's not normal, and just try to brush it aside, try to move on, try to be happy with life. I'm not sure what my future holds. I told my wife the second time, I said, I'm done mountain biking. I'm done. I can't do this to you again. And I don't know. I don't know what happens. Like, if I land on my shoulder again, can it get more separated? I think it can. And like I said with this one, could this break? I think so. So I don't know. Like, I already was a cautious mountain biker, so maybe I'll do uphill only and walk my bike down. I mean, like, I don't know. But I love skiing. I can still ski. Swimming, I think I can do. I haven't done that since this injury. There are other things you could do with your life. So if mountain biking was one of them and you're not sure you want to do it anymore, that's all right by me. But yeah, it's hard to say what I want to do in the future. But what's important now is to take care of my family and kids. And so being able to continue working is important. Being able to help them physically is important as they're growing. So if you have toddlers or infants, you probably want to be safe about your activities. I think that about covers it. Oh, and whatever choice you make, give it at least 6 months, at least, if not a full year. If there's any truth to the whole season, or like the weather outside having a factor on your joints, you gotta go through all 4 seasons and see how your body does. Try all the sports, and see how your body does. You gotta give it time, in my opinion, if you can. Or if you can get it done and all the stars are aligned and you can get it done in 3 weeks, you can do it then. But so far, happy with both results. So I don't know what to tell you. I may decide. There are days where it sucks and I'm like, maybe I should do it. So I may decide, but for now, I'm pretty confident I'm going to leave it as is. And deal with the arthritis later. Hopefully in the future, they've invented something that cures arthritis. My friend's a radio oncologist, and he said he's got friends that can radiate the arthritis away, and I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. Let's do that. So long term, there may be some issues that crop up, But I'm hoping science gets better and they're not as much of an issue as they are today. All right. Well, hopefully that's a good update. Maybe I'll do one more after a full year and tell you how I feel. But I'm happy with both. Just take a deep breath. You'll be fine. You'll make the right choice.